So, all right. So I just started recording and I think we're back. This is episode 21 now.
Oh
Today,
wow.
I'm joined by, I'm going to keep it German, Professor
Mhm.
Dr. Eva Harth. You are German, right? German
Yes,
or, okay.
German. Yes,
Where were you born in
German
Germany?
American actually. In Cologne. So like I mean a
Oh.
little bit outside of Cologne.
Mm.
So yeah, a
That's
little
on
bit
the
outside.
that's on the west side of Germany, right? The couple
Yes.
hours south of Dusseldorf.
It is
Um,
actually north of well yeah, yes, it is north of Düsseldorf.
mm,
So it is actually very close to the Belgium and Netherlands border. So
mm.
you can just travel very easily to a different country, and these are just very, very good countries to visit. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, it is a really interesting area, and the Romans have been there for a long time. So you find all these old villas, and so it has a very nice tradition in trade. So like it is and of course we have this big dome, you know, this beautiful dome.
Mm.
Yeah.
Ich
Yeah, this
spreche
is
ein
so.
bisschen Deutsch.
Oh wow, this is
I
wonderful.
yeah, I took it in high school and
Oh
then
wow.
I really enjoyed it. So,
Yeah.
but they didn't offer German in my like undergrad, so I stopped taking it. But I
Mm.
got back into like, are you familiar with Duolingo, like the app where you like learn a second language?
Yes.
I started taking German again and I don't know,
Oh, this is
I really
wonderful.
enjoy it. They're my team to win the World Cup this year, so I don't know if you're paying attention to that at all. They're my team to
Yes.
win. And
Very good. Yeah, I mean, the German language is really an interesting language. I think when I would not have been born into it, I would think I would have had a hard time to learn it
mm,
because you have these capital letters in it, you have all this grammar. But I think you can express things very accurately with German. You know, I think it's a very interesting language.
yeah,
Yeah,
there is
yes,
like a
yes.
word for everything. And the
Hmm.
it's hard to say though because English is it's such an abstract language that I think
Hmm.
German's really easy to learn, honestly.
Yes, yeah,
But
yeah.
so it's a very strong language though. I talked to my
Hmm.
friends, it's not like the language of love. It's like very it's very
Actually, I have to say that the romantic movement in the literature was actually started in Germany.
really
Nobody believes me. So like the romanticism, and so like this is a very strong direction in literature, and it has been it was started in Germany. Yes, but
that's
nobody believes that. But
yeah.
yes, yeah,
I didn't know that, but
yes,
that makes
yes.
sense, especially like a lot of the old like religions like
Mm-hmm.
they talk about like post Germanic era, like
Yes,
Germanic language. Like, oh, yeah, that's exactly it. Germanic
yeah.
language is like
Mm-hmm.
like one of the first languages, right? So that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But anyway, but
Okay.
today we're gonna talk about polymers, and
Mm-hmm.
I kind of definitely we discussed a little bit of this beforehand, but talk a little bit about yourself. And I know because like, what is it? How did you originally get into chemistry? Because I know you did your. Hang on one second. You did you went to University of Bonn, right? And
Yes.
University of
Yeah.
Zurich was your
Mm-hmm.
PhD. So how did you? What was your path to get into chemistry in general, but then why like polymer chemistry, and how did that set itself apart from how did you get into that kind of thing?
Yeah. So like in Europe, in Germany, you have to decide after your high school degree directly what you want to become. Like it's not that you can do a bachelor and then decide what you want to go for a you want to become a doctor. You have to immediately go into that specific basically into graduate school sort of. So
Mm,
and I've always wanted to become actually a surgeon. And so like I did not get into medical school. So like I wanted to become really a surgeon. This was my decision. So
mm,
and so I got into this interview, but I did not make it to medical school, and I was a little bit crushed by this. Um, and then actually my parents just talked to me a lot, and then I always said I like to work with my hands, and it has to be something experimental. And then my father actually suggested, why don't you study chemistry? And I'm like, chemistry? Chemistry. I did not even have chemistry in high school, so it was like
wow.
something. Yeah, we had just our chemistry teacher was always sick, or like it was basically not taught, and it was not my favorite subject at all.
Mm,
And then I just started studying it because I always thought, okay, maybe can transition over and study medicine again, you know, like because there were a lot of people who started, you know, on chemistry or pharmaceuticals and transitioned later over into the medical field.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started it, and actually I enjoyed it. Or like, I mean, it was not easy to just start from nothing. But what I really enjoyed was that you can make things. You know, like you can prepare materials, and it is novel. And of course, it is. I mean, when you study chemistry, or like when you start any subject, you want to do well. You know, like you are very focused on your classes, and you are not really thinking very deeply. Okay, what can I do with this later? But I noticed that I really enjoy doing it, and I never thought, or like I did not have thought again to go into the medical field again, because I started also to work in hospitals, and I realized that the suffering of people would be too much for me. You know, I cannot handle this very well. And then I thought, okay, chemistry has so many applications. I mean, you can develop drug molecules, you can, you know, you can do many different things, and it has many different applications. So, and so I started in Bonn, and this is, of course, in Europe, you have always public universities. These are not private. And in this year, you have always what we call the pick cycles. You know, there were lots of students who wanted to study chemistry, and I had to wait for practica. So like we have like so it's very practically experimentally oriented. So you have a lot of like all day long is like lab, and then you have to do, of course, the lectures. But it is like what we have for the undergraduates. We have basically for the entire study of chemistry. And then I had to wait so long, and then I met a friend of mine, and she said my brother studies in Zurich, and then so which is in Switzerland. So and then I thought, okay, maybe I just stop studying in Bonn, and then I go to Zurich. So I finished in Bonn and did my bachelor degree, and then I transitioned to the University of Zurich. And since this is Switzerland, they have other requirements. So I had to repeat some classes, and this is where I did my master's. And I did my master's. So you have to do a thesis before you can even start a Ph.D. So like we always have a master's. So like it's not like in the US. It's a little bit differently structured. Actually.
So you have to go for the master's before the PhD in Germany?
Yes.
Or is,
yes,
okay,
definitely.
interesting.
I mean, it was, I think it's still in entire Europe, this is like this, to do a master's. I mean, I think in Britain not, but in, you know, in France and in Germany, so like in Europe. So, and I did my master's on sugar chemistry. So like there was Professor Vasella, and he transitioned later to the ETH. And sugar chemistry is really, I mean, this is organic chemistry, of course, and what you do is usually it is centered around what kind of carbohydrate you have, and then also the protection group. You know, like you have always a protection group. You want to do something at the anomeric center, which is very it's differently in the reactivity, and this is how you can connect different sugar molecules together. And so you make a reaction, you purify, and then you get rid of the protection groups again. And during that time, fullerenes became extremely, it was a big hype. I mean, it was the C60 molecule, and everybody thought, oh my God, this will become the new benzene, and everybody was very excited. And so I started a collaboration, of course, driven by my mentor, and this was with François Diederich, and he was at the ETH as well, and he did a lot of fullerene chemistry at that time. And then we thought, okay, we attach a sugar molecule to fullerene and see if, because fullerene is very hydrophobic, it's like all carbon, and then sugar is very polar, maybe we can bring it onto surfaces, or, you know, what kind of properties will it have?
Now, so just real quick, so fullerene is a spherical, like carbon thing. Okay, so it's a ball. It's basically a ball of carbon.
Yes, it is it's actually an aromatic structure. Okay. So it's like all conjugated. So what you can do is like you can attach, like you can make this other chemistry with it. So like it reacts like like a conjugated aromatic system.
Yeah.
And
for those that like don't understand chemistry, aromaticity and conjugation just means that the electron cloud is kind of fluid. Like the electrons can kind of move throughout. If you can think about spherical, it's able to move throughout the system. That's what conjugation and aromaticity kind of get at. But also too, just for other people to understand, fullerene is, because it's made of carbon and hydrogen, it's very hydrophobic. So it's not soluble. It does not mix well with things like water or like alcohols. Like they will not mix together. But if you put the sugar molecules on it, I guess then you get more solubility. I guess that's one.
So like we could make Langmuir blotted films. These are basically you bring a molecule onto a water surface, and then it kind of directs itself with the anchor which goes into the water, and the hydrophobic part stays on the top. So like you get a really nice film. So it's kind of like a self-assembled film on top of water. And this is actually what we investigated too, or we wanted to see if you can even do drug delivery with it, because it is kind of like a radical sponge, like we thought maybe this is interesting.
Yeah.
So like basically my master's was around how do we get it was a mono deprotected onto a fullerene. So I made a molecule and then I attached it and then I deprotected it. So like this was my method. But the reason why I say this is like I decided at that time that maybe it is better for me that I not stay in the sugar field. Maybe I do something with fullerene, and I wanted also to go back to Germany. So after 4 years in Zurich, I just thought, okay, I just have experienced Switzerland, and it was a fantastic time. But maybe I go somewhere else. And at that time, there were two people very famous through Europe with this fullerene chemistry, because it was a real hype. I mean, I've never seen that afterwards again. So this was Professor Klaus Malone, and he was at the MPI for Polymer Research in Mainz. And there was Andreas Hirsch, and he's in Tübingen. He was in Tübingen. So I interviewed with both of them, and so like I decided to go to the MPI in Mainz, and this is a very interesting structure of a place where you can do your PhD, because it's not a university, it's an institute. But so you get the degree from the University of Mainz, but you can conduct the research at this Max-Planck-Institute for Polymer Research. And in Germany, we have like several Max-Planck-Institutes. So like these are for chemistry, they are for geology, like these are just I don't know how to compare this, but these are just really physical institutes. We have a lot of virtual centers, but they are like professors working on one specific subject. These are like maybe 10 research groups on one specific, and this is polymer chemistry in all aspects you can even think of, like synthesis, theory, physical chemistry. And this makes it very interesting, because all people in that building, I think we were, these are like 300 people in that building that do nothing else than polymer chemistry.
So I don't know what the analogy would be in America, but I know I'm very familiar with the Max-Planck-Institute for Kohlenforschung. Is that what it is? Which one is it?
Kohlenforschung.
Kohlenforschung.
Kohlenforschung. I don't know where this name comes from. So Kohlenforschung, this is actually carbon. Kohle is basically this is coal. Coal. So basically, this is carbon research. Like this is a good translation.
I tried getting that one's in Mulheim, and I'm familiar with that one because I wanted to get Eloy Ferschner to give a presentation here, because I think he's the director at that one. But I don't know what I don't know if there's like a direct analogy in America. I know but there's like multiple ones of like there's like multiple Max-Planck-Institute, and each one's like specialized in their own like research. I don't know what the analogy would be here.
I don't know. It's sort of like an
It's a place to do academic research, but it's not
Yes,
like,
yes,
but it's not a
exactly. But it's very
university.
focused, and there are
Mm,
also the Fraunhofer Institute and the Helmholtz Institute. These are
mm,
similarly done. And what is interesting about it is like, I mean, I never had to teach, you know, like, I mean, you just start and then you
yeah.
just continue doing your research.
Yeah, there's no like
And
teacher assistantship. Like you don't have to like
yes,
do anything like
yes,
that. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Mm,
And it's very focused because everybody in that building does polymer chemistry, and the research groups are usually very large. So in
mm.
my research, you know, my group from Professor Malone, we were 60 people. So and
Oh
it was
wow.
structured, yes, and it was structured in a way that Habilitant, basically, this is an assistant professor, he was leading like a subgroup of like maybe 6 to 10 people,
Mm,
and I was in the fullerene group. So
yeah.
and basically my PhD was on fullerene. What this entails is basically trying to attach molecules to fullerene, bring it into polymers. Um, yeah, so like
Yeah.
this
So
was
in
my, you know, like this was my PhD, and
yeah.
I can tell you this was not easy because you had to you know, work with very small quantities because we got this from Höchst, you know, like this was like maybe 50 milligrams, and then here you go, you know, for the next 4 months, you just have to do something with that, and and you know, you can, and but that at that time, so this kind of hype, you know, people realized that this is actually not as simple. So it was very easy to publish paper initially, but
Yeah.
then it became harder because you know, like this molecule sucked up, you know, like solvents like crazy. So the NMRs they had always like in the you know
In the aromatic, what,
the,
6 to 8
yes,
probably.
that
Like.
yeah, they have like you know like really like a lot of like it looked like a lot of impurities,
Mm,
and so I tried to attach it to semiconducting materials like it's high stacked and all these kind of things.
mm.
But I have to say that when I now, you know, like I'm now a professor um and I see these young people doing a PhD under my guidance. So I have to say that, you know, when you're a young person, you take everything very personal, you know, like
Mm.
this is kind of like you cannot change it. It's a maturity process, but you just have to go through it. You know, like although it was very hard, but it never occurred to me to give it up or to change it or to not to complete it. You know, it was
Yeah.
kind of like a you just have to you just have to do it and
Yeah.
the best you can. And this is sort of like what you know you have to get it to work.
Yeah.
And this I can tell everybody who does a PhD just just stick with it and go through it. You know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, definitely one of the things is like just because you have bad research doesn't make you a bad person, right? So that's always one of the big. That's one of the
You know,
like.
I mean, I learned a lot, and
Yeah.
you know, I put this in photovoltaic devices. You know, like I thought, okay, you know, where can we put this in? And I had actually a lot of like different collaborations. You know, like I made adducts where the
Mm,
fullerene became more soluble. So we had several collaborators, and I traveled to Belgium. There, you know, we wanted to go into contact lenses, but it taught me that it is all very broad. It was all very applied. It was always the question, what is this good for? You know, can we use it for something? And this,
mm,
I would say, shaped my thinking till today. You know, like that I want to make a material which you can use for something, where you can have a lot of, you know, you can make, you know, polymers usually you can make in larger quantities. You
mm.
can the 1 step, 2 step synthesis. So like this was very, yeah, very good to experience.
So
And
what were like the issues we're working with the fullerenes? Like was
fullerene,
it like
um,
isolation and purifying it? Like
yes,
that's.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm,
So like the purification. So and in this group, they are pioneered a specific attachment method, or we tried different attachment method, and I used AG Alder. So
mm, mm.
we attached small molecules, and I had like ester groups which I attached to it. Yes, and I yes, this is what I remember.
So
I
how,
did
like
with my
like
PhD.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah. So do you just like
yes.
take a strong base, deprotonate like some hydrogen off the fullerene, and then just do some chemistry? Like, is that how it works, or like? pretty
Yes,
much.
yeah,
Okay.
yes, yeah. And so like the solubility is always an issue, you know, like also the GPC was very interesting in following, you know, like you can analyze this also to GPC. So the characterization is also very, very important.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so you worked in
Mhm.
so you worked with fullerenes throughout your PhD. What was the
Mhm.
and then but after your PhD you went into industry for a little bit, right?
No, then I actually did my
Oh, postdoc. That's right. I forgot
yes,
about that.
I
Yeah,
did
I
my
forgot.
postdoc,
Yeah.
but it was a specific postdoc. So
Mhm.
Klaus Mullen had a connection to IBM,
Mhm.
and so I got a postdoctoral position with Craig Hawker, who was working at IBM, and IBM at that time. So this was a very interesting setup. So the NSF had how can I explain this? So UC Davis, Stanford, and IBM, they had a program which was called CPMA, Center for Polymeric Macromolecular Interfaces. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I say this correctly.
Yeah,
So,
polymer
and yeah,
interfaces, macromolecular like
yes,
assembly, something like that, right?
yes, exactly, CPMA. And this was funded by NSF, and this enabled um, um, these researchers at IBM to bring in postdocs from European countries. So and so I was officially a Stanford student, but I never saw Stanford. Basically, I saw it once a year, you know, like. But we had a collaboration with Bob Wimett. This was very interesting. But I was in the group of Craig Hawker, and Craig Hawker, yeah, he's a very important figure in developing controlled radical polymerizations. At that time, you know, this was 2000. This was, yeah, and all like NMP, VAF, and ATRP. They were just, you recognize the importance of these controlled radical polymerization methods.
Mhm.
So with this said to a general audience, like acrylates, they are usually at that time were done by free radical polymerization, but then you cannot control the length of the polymer very well. So like it prevents you to make controlled materials with it. But having a controlled method where you can make them very homogeneous and, you know, like in the exact length, this gives you tremendous opportunities for materials. And so Craig Hawker is today a professor at UCSB and is the director of the Materials Research Science Institute they have at UCSB. And this was a completely different environment, and I enjoyed it tremendously. So like when I started in his lab, I really decided, I mean, I want to stay in the country, first of all. It was so exciting, and it was like a totally different totally different atmosphere. And it was a small group. I mean, these were staff scientists who basically had 2 or 3 postdocs, and this was the group. So it was very intense.
Yeah.
So like I saw Craig like constantly during the day, and we, you know, I did the reactions, he wrote the paper. So like this is how this works. And but it was an incredible speed. You know, I got so much out of my postdocs. It was absolutely incredible. And there were people from Sweden and from the Netherlands. It was super fun. And yeah, and this is where I really entered polymer chemistry. You know, I did a lot of reactions with NMP. This is nitroxide mediated radical polymerization. And also what I have to say is here, it starts already where I can say how important polymers are for our everyday life.
Yeah.
But I thought always like, okay, what has a computer manufacturer to do with polymers? And at that time, they wanted to make a dielectric material which isolates the copper wires in hard drive. And so like this has to be very well isolated, otherwise you cannot build these chips very small. So like they wanted to make them very small. So, and they wanted to create, this is a dielectric material. It's basically a very porous material where you want to incorporate a lot of air bubbles. So the entire research went about how can we get something into cis-3-octane. Basically, this is a very hard material. How can we incorporate as many air bubbles in it as possible. So, and when I
And this is your
entered
research. This is the research at I'm sorry. This is the research at IBM, right?
yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Which
Yes.
is in
So
San
this
Jose,
was
right?
my
San Jose, California, I think.
yes. This is actually right. This is in Northern California, and this is
Mm.
in IBM Almaden. So like
Yep.
this is a beautiful site. This is in a natural park, you know, like bunnies hopping around and deers. It is beautiful, and it was built in the 80s. They have like big wings, you know, like they had. I mean, it is a fantastic site, and it's
Yeah.
where everything from IBM was developed, and there was still a lot of research done there. And when you visit this today, there's not as much research done, which is very sad. So, you know, industry, I don't know if this is a common theme that industry does not do research anymore, but at that time, they did all the lithography methods were developed there. So like it was all research, and it was a really very exciting environment.
Mhm.
And what I basically did is like we collapsed linear polymers into small nanoparticles. So like it's what they call the intramolecular chain collapse. That means one chain is cross-linked, but only one chain. So therefore the particle is ultra small, like 5 nanometers. And since this is organic, this was made from polystyrene, which is a completely organic material. And when you bring this into a matrix and burn it, then you get this ultra small air bubble. But you know, like my research, I did not know a whole lot about the background, but it was for me very interesting that I was then really a polymer chemist. You know, like I did polymerization kinetics. I had like suddenly like all these styrene materials. I had different molecular weights, and at that time the monomer scope of NMP polymerization was still discovered. You know, like it was still everything very much at the beginning. And RAF was not as important as it is today. It was still a very a niche polymerization method. NMP at that time was more important, and then ETRP, but RAF was just starting to get up. Yeah, and then I spent 2 years there, and I really wanted to stay in this country, and I came in with a J1 visa, and the J1 visa is only valid for 3 years. You know, like when you come in as a foreigner, you know exactly what you can do with your visa and not. So I had to either go back to my country or find a job, and I thought already about academia, but you know, the time is not enough to just write proposals and you know go in academia, and I just wanted to stay in the country. So during my tenure basically at IBM, we started to collaborate with a lot of, or like with a few professors, which were kind of important in my, you know, they helped me to stay in the country, and also they advised me in many different ways, I can say. Yeah. So like this was so we started to collaborate with the lab from Jean Fréchet in Berkeley, because Craig Hawker knew him very well, because it was his postdoctoral advisor. So we went to Berkeley because we wanted to test materials. We collaborated with them. And also Bob Weymouth, we also collaborated with him. So I knew these people. So and Jean Fréchet had a connection to a startup company who licensed one of his patents, which was a dendritic polyester. And I went to this company for 2 years. This was Sinoport, and the idea, and this was in Santa Clara. The idea of this company was that you map the drug molecule as it is in sort of a nutrition. So what the company did, it was more a biotech company that mapped the entire intestine, what kind of receptors are there, and how you can manage that a body will take this drug up and will recognize it as a nutrition. So like there was a lot of like medicinal chemistry going on, and what my job was, it was sort of like funded by an SBIR grant. So my job was to make a dendrimer with a lot of surface areas to solubilize a very challenging drug molecule, and this was alendronate. So alendronate is a osteoporosis drug, and it has it has different charges, a positive and a negative charge. So you cannot take this like, it's very difficult for you to take this drug. It gives you a lot of uncomfort, or like it makes you sick. You have to lie down. You cannot consume it with milk and all these kind of things.
Probably a lot of permeability issues too, right?
Yes,
like with a
exactly.
dianon. What that means is
Yes.
like, because it's charged, it can't
Mhm.
cross hydrophobic membranes in your cells,
Yes,
right? Yeah.
absolutely. And the idea was that first of all, the dendrimer had a certain size that basically it is, there's also the mucus in the intestine, how it is taken up and going through. So and I was the only polymer chemist in that company, and it taught me a lot how medicinal chemists see a polymer. Like like I came with my my multi-spectra, and it was not one peak, it was just a distribution, because it was, and they're like, what is that? So for medicinal chemists, this is like, it's a different, it's a macromolecule. And I realized also how you have to communicate science. We met every Tuesday morning. It was like a big group meeting, and it taught me a lot how to present research. Like how you structure this, what is important for medicinal chemists, what is important for me. So when I basically went out there to interview, I had all the training you ever can wish of. And of course, a startup is something not permanent. And in my mind, like in my German mind, I needed something more stable. I always was thinking, okay,
my German mind.
Is this really something what I would like to do forever? Or like, and then I had the idea of what was the idea with the academia, but I didn't know how to put it off.
Yeah.
And so I asked a lot of colleagues of mine, or like I went to conferences, but I had nothing to present, and I felt very bad about it. And they asked me, like, how did you do this? How do you apply? And they told me, okay, you need, of course, recommendation letters, but that's not all of it. You need like a proposal. These are 3 proposals, and then you hopefully get an invitation, or maybe you get no invitation. So then I actually asked Professor Fouché if he has a model of of proposals, because I did not know how they look like. And he showed it to me, how they are written. Yeah, and then I started to prepare this, and there's always one deadline in a year. This is in October, and I sent everything away to just 25 universities, and then I started interviewing. So I got 5 interviews, and I got 1 offer, and this is what I took. And this was at Vanderbilt.
Yep.
And and then I started my academic career, and this was something totally different. I moved from California to Tennessee.
To Nashville.
I had never in Nashville, exactly. I've never been to Tennessee, and this was something. Yeah, I never regret that step, because it was you are suddenly, I mean, it is pretty amazing what schools do. I mean, they invite you, and they look at your proposal, and they give you a bunch of money and say, okay, we will check on you every year, and then we will see what you made out of this. It's pretty fascinating. And it is, I mean, there's a lot of trust there, but suddenly you are really on your own. You sit alone in your office, and then you think, okay, this is now it. And then you have your idea, and then you get 1 student, and then the second one, and then you have a group. And you start to teach. It's extremely mind-boggling, but you grow with it. You grow with it very fast. And it is, I think, the only method to learn. You are queen of your own kingdom. You have to make it, and nobody else is there to help you. I mean, of course, colleagues come over and ask you, so how's it going? And somebody says, no, you have to write grant first. No, you have to publish first. But in the end, you just need to, you just feel it on your own. You have to know, you just do what you think is right. And
I think what's interesting too is your path to here wasn't like, you didn't have like a dream of setting out to be like a professor. At least it doesn't sound like that, but it just kind of like one thing led to another, and like
exactly.
you just like we're just along for the ride.
Yes, and sometimes it is really like this. I mean, many people know immediately what they want to become, but I didn't. So, but I knew what I liked and what I didn't like, and also I had a good feeling for timing. So, and I suddenly knew I had to do something. I really have to. I have to do this. Or like when I worked in a company, I mean, I did not go out in the evening and had fun or whatever. I wrote proposals till 2 o'clock in the morning, and then I went to work again. So you have to
That's
have
not fun. That's not fun.
Well, but it's like it's different. You have to sort of like, and I knew I have to apply this year. I knew it. I cannot wait another year. So I had it in me, and and I was right, because at that year when they hired, every department has a vision. What they want to, what program they want to have, and at that time they wanted to have a nano program, and Vanderbilt had a nano institute, and with all my particles I did, and I wanted to continue to make nanoparticles. I fit exactly in there what they wanted. So you have to be the right person at the right time. So when I would have been a year later, it would have not worked out. And yeah, the timing is extremely important. And just follow it. And yeah, this is.
So what was your proposal to get into Vanderbilt? Because I typically, like when you're a graduate student, like at least starting out, you'll kind of be given a project, and then like you'll have the opportunity, especially and then you have the opportunity to kind of work on your own stuff, especially and especially as a postdoc, you can kind of do your own projects, broadly speaking, unless you're kind of coming into like what you did, then you're kind of given the projects. But I feel like it's most of the time it's like you can kind of do what you want. So like what was your proposal to that kind of launched you into the Vanderbilt? Like what specifically?
Yeah, so of course you have always the best ideas when there's the deadline, like when you are under pressure, like it's always like this. When you gotta do something, you have to come up with an idea. So so it is always when you start off. I see this also when I read now proposals of people who apply for an assistant professor position. It's always sort of a melange of your experiences. Like I had like a new method for an intramolecular chain collapse particle in it, and I took like some chemistry from my PhD. I just could apply one use alder method. This is what I did, and then I had an idea to what that? So yes, fine. It was attaching back to make a semi-conducting particle, but what is organic. Like at that time was quantum dots became very popular, but they are like
quantum dots.
Quantum dots, yes. And they are cadmium selenide. And I thought maybe I can do this with isolated semi-conducting polymers. I wrap them also like into a nanoparticle. And this was very interesting for that institute. And they had also ideas to cover gold surfaces, or I came up with a neuro-conducting thing. I don't know. So I wrote 3 proposals, but I finished basically 2. But I have to say, then you always start with your proposals, but then you start talking to people, and then the magic happens. So, and therefore, it's so important that when you enter a university, or when you decide for a job in academia, you morph basically into these people you see. So, like Vanderbilt was very driven by the medical school. So like it was, the chemistry department, everybody collaborated very heavily with the medical center. And when you then start talking to people, you are approached, can you help us with this? Can you help us with that? And then you start thinking about it. You see suddenly other problems you never thought about. And so my entire nanoparticle drug delivery system, which I developed for like where my lab became known for, or like what was my trademark basically in my lab. This was basically when a professor from the medical school came over and asked me, can you put a dye molecule onto a peptide? And I said, yeah, we can do that. And then we did this in a week, and he thought I was God. Okay, so, and so this was fantastic. So and then he said, yeah, there are just drugs out there. They're very hydrophobic. You know, like we want to bring them into the body. And this was Dr. Hallahan, and he is now at Ohio State. And this was a very important collaborator for me. And through this inspiration, we developed what we called our nanosponge. This was a nanoparticle which was cross-linked, but it was not one chain which was cross-linked. It was basically many chains, but we could control the sizes. And this entire research I did then for, over the entire period I was at Vanderbilt, starting off as an assistant professor, then associate professor. But
real quick, Professor Harth, just about the nano sponge. When you say controlling the length, do you mean like the area, like from the center to the outer end of it? Is that what you mean by that?
So actually, I wanted to say the size. So like when you have one linear polymer, and then you take another polymer which is usually shorter, but it is di-functionalized, and you have pendant functional groups along that polymer backbone, you can basically form a network. And we managed to make these networks in particular nanoscopic sizes. We could make particles from 20 nanometers to 200 nanometers, but they were like in themselves, they had always the standard deviation of like maybe like 20%.
I see.
Kind of exactly.
And this is something I probably should have asked earlier, but we'll get into it now. Is can we explain exactly what a polymer is? Like what to the because I think because we talked around the term a lot, and I know what it means, but like, can you explain it to like what is it exactly?
Yeah, so you have small molecules. This is basically maybe for example, vanillin. This is like one molecule, and when you analyze it, you see one very specific structure. And a polymer is when you take one small molecule and add this many times together, you create a string. So like it's kind of like a pearl necklace. This is always the explanation how you can explain it. And it is a string. But you can have also polymers which they look like combs, they look like real networks. They look they have like different what we call different architectures and different topologies and branching densities, and this is where the very unusual properties of these polymers arising. And
so depending on your monomer, right, whatever that one strand is, you can get different properties of the macro structure.
Exactly. Yes.
I feel like the easy example, the easy example would be plastics, right? That is the easy example.
Yes. For example,
so what is a plastic? Like, let's start. Like, like, what is a plastic?
So a plastic is a term which is in fact not really scientific. So like this is more a jargon, or like what people connect with a plastic bag or like a plastic bottle. But it is it's in a technical term a polyolefin. These are most plastics what people think is a plastic is in a technical term a polyolefin.
Yeah.
And
so plastic doesn't have it doesn't mean anything in the science world, basically. Like plastic doesn't really mean anything.
No.
So it's good that we kind of clear this up, because I know a lot of people.
It is, and therefore there's also a lot of confusion when people want to go plastic free, or like think plastic is like a very bad material, but it is so versatile. And I mean, it can be a plastic bag, but it can be also a pipe which can manage it you can send something very hot to it.
Oh, yeah.
You can have many different applications, or like a hydrogel, what you inject in a body for drug delivery. This is also sort of it's a polymer, not necessarily a plastic, or what you have in your sneaker. These are all,
so plastics, right? So plastics, nano sponges, which, you know, for drug delivery, you know, PVC, these are all under the umbrella of polymers, right? So like,
yes, exactly.
And obviously they all have different properties.
Overarching,
so that's definitely important to distinguish, I think, for a lot of people. Because there are so many applications for polymers. Depending on, and like we mentioned, depending on what your monomer is, whatever the single unit is, and if you change that, you can change the physical properties of the macrostructure.
Exactly.
Which is
example,
important. Go ahead.
Yes. For example, in the most common plastic, polyethylene, right? So like this is one monomer. This is actually very fascinating when you see the acrylate world, and it's also that polymer chemists in the acrylate world don't talk to the people in the ethylene world, because it's so, the monomers, they have like a totally different character. So ethylene and propylene, they look very simple, but you can make everything out of these two monomers because they can branch. So a polyethylene, you can make amorphous. This means it's soft and very, almost wax-like or even fluid. Or you can have a polyethylene which is like which has the ultra high density polyethylene. It's a very hard, tough material, and this is. It is fascinating that you can make this out of one single monomer.
I would say ethylene is just, it's literally C2H4. That's the chemical composition of this thing. That's all it is. It's just a gas. I don't know where the feedstock is. I'm unfamiliar with that, but it's a very simple molecule. There's nothing really special about it.
It comes directly out of the oil production. It's a side product out of the oil production.
And then when you say acrylates, those they are polar monomers, right? They typically have oxygen. That's part of their composition. Now, let's see. How do I want to phrase this?
So therefore, polymer chemist is not polymer chemist. So like it's such a versatile field. When you have a polymer conference, it's very specialized already, depending on what your polymerization method is. So for polyolefins, the polymerization method is mostly guided by the catalyst. And the people who make the catalyst, they use that monomer. So when you talk to acrylate people, I was an acrylate, basically I dealt with acrylate or vinyl monomers. You use radical methods but usually you stay in that field. And it's not, because these monomers, they have very specific properties, and you need very specific methods. So this is already enough to study for the rest of your life, basically. But you see, it is a very broad field, and the application of polymers, you can use them in biomedical research. You can, of course, you have the rubber people, like this is again another section. You can focus on polyolefins strictly, working only with these two monomers, or you can try to enhance the properties of each different polymer, and then you bring in the other monomer family in it, and then you are in the business of like increasing the polymerization method, or dealing with mechanisms of
so one application obviously is plastic, but this is something that we should discuss a little bit, is the nanosponge idea in drug delivery, another application of polymers, because basically what happens is you make your polymer, and depending on the elements and the atoms that are in they will self-assemble into this, I guess you could say, spherical thing where the outer half is hydrophilic and the inner half is hydrophobic, right?
So,
That
like
go,
what you described, this would be what a micelle would
yeah,
be.
myself.
This is also a very common drug delivery system, because what you want to use is a so the drug delivery idea came because you have like very hydrophobic small molecules. These are like the drugs you want to deliver into a body. They're very hydrophobic. It means they do not mix well with your blood.
Yeah.
And so you need something to just emulse to solubilize, or like
To deliver it. I mean, like this,
yes,
it's something
you
that's
just want to
compatible.
yes, exactly. You want to form a sort of a suspension that, like that it is brought into the system and accumulate at the tumor site. So, and the entire this is the field of the nano drug delivery. So it has been not very successful, or like it has been criticized a lot, that after all these years of study, there is not really a breakthrough like there are not many drugs, or like drug delivery systems approved, and it shows you how complex it is. So
Yeah. So in an ideal world, in an ideal world, you would have the micelle, but then you would have the drug inside the pocket. You would deliver it, and then like I guess the micelle would just, I don't know, it would go somewhere else and not affect you, basically, right? But I guess it's hard to do.
So the idea was that the nanoparticles, they have like a certain architecture, like they're self-assembled, or in our case, it was a network, it has a globular structure, and it holds the hydrophobic drug inside these hydrophobic pockets. And then on the outer end, you have like targeting units, or like solubilizing units. And then through the architecture, it goes to the tumor, because the tumor has a very specific vasculature, which is a little bit bigger, and it can accumulate particles in these regions. So automatically it stays in the tumor site, and then it gives the drug away. So this was called the EPR effect. So there's always a name for it. But this is like a passive targeting. It's a targeting through the architectural form of this nanoparticle. And then to make it more effective, then you have a targeted delivery where you attach mostly like either antibodies or peptides. Peptides is easier to deal with, and then it's guided through this. So what?
No, real quick. So the nano sponges that you worked on, is that different than like what a typical micelle is? Are they different?
Yes.
Okay, how are they different? That's something that I misunderstood.
So we were not working with self-assembly. We had basically a string of polyester, which is the degradable polymer. And so like along this polyester, we had like little units which react with another difunctionalized polymer, and it creates, when you bring these together, it creates a network. And so this network is then completely hydrophobic, and you can then isolate it, and then you can load your drug into this network. And so this was this was our selling point, and it worked actually very well, because you can incorporate, and you can make like a gram, or like I don't know how much of this nano sponge, and then you can load different drugs into it. We made dual delivery systems. You can then load different drugs for different applications.
Now, would this be like orally dosed? Okay.
So like it's usually it goes systemic. This means it's injected into the bloodstream.
Okay.
So but we did also eye delivery towards the eye. It is then injected into the eye. So because
injected into your eye?
Yes.
Jeez. That's
Yeah,
brutal.
so it's therefore your environment is important. So because at Vanderbilt there was a really good eye institute.
Okay.
And I started to work with Dave Hawkins. So and their work on glaucoma and macular degeneration. And so like it's pretty scary how the drugs are delivered. So like they're injected directly into your eyeball, into the white zone.
That
But you
sounds.
have no.
Were you a test subject?
No, I mean so like they always tell you that I did not try it, but you have no nerves there. So like they poke you with a very, very small needle and they inject it basically in it. So it's of course the delivery time is extremely fast, and these people they get injections every month. So it's of course very stressful for them because the idea alone, getting poked into the eyeball is kind of like.
Yeah, that's very, very inefficient way.
Yes.
But it is a proof of concept though. So like,
yes, exactly, yeah.
if anything else.
So I mean, during that time, I mean, it was a really very, very, very successful program in my lab. I mean, we made different. I could collaborate with different professors, and for different applications. But what I also realized is like the real drug delivery, or like we have also here at UH a drug discovery institute. The real drug molecules, they have to work without a drug delivery system. This is the ideal world. And so like always when I wanted to collaborate with them when they developed a new drug, and I said, well, actually we do not want to need you. We want a drug which works without your drug delivery system.
Yeah.
And of course, like for me this was kind of sad to hear, but this is logic. Like you want a drug which just gets injected and works. And but I have to say that the entire drug delivery world there is still a lot to discover, because there are lots of drugs which fail in the last phase of the clinical trial because they are too hydrophobic and too toxic then because of this. And then you might ask, why are they so hydrophobic? So why can they not just attach some molecules which, or like
something that's hydrophilic that can like pass it through?
Yeah. More hydrophilic. But you need the hydrophobicity to enter cells, which is the lipid layer. So there is a certain balance to make it more hydrophilic enough. But they're usually really good drugs. They're always hydrophobic. So
a lot of times you'll see in the medicinal chemistry like literature is that you might get a lot of good results like in vitro, like so like it'll like, oh, I discovered this new drug which helps, I don't know, with headache, which is great. It helps out with these cells, but then you go to in vivo, which means now we're going to try it into an actual living cell, and it can pass through like the cell membrane because or for whatever reason. So
yes, exactly.
Yeah, drug design is a very delicate process. That
yes, and like actually the NIH, they had once a call out there. Just you can look through libraries of drug molecules which look really highly potent against all sorts of like diseases, but they've all failed, and you can actually order them and do whatever you want with them to make them more useful. They're now used only in fungal things in dogs. Like they're like beautiful drug molecules. They have amazing applications, or like the amazing. I mean, they look good, but you can only use them maybe in GMS or in GMF, or they have then suddenly all these limitations. But so like this was Vanderbilt, and when I had all this delivered, when I had all developed my nano sponges, I came sort of to an end. Like you have always for a wave. You start off your program, you just see that it's working. You run over campus and work with everybody. But this came sort of like, I always was thinking, okay, what is now next, right? I mean, I can start a startup company, or like what I'm gonna do with this, or do I do now something else? And this is always like a thing. I think what comes after your tenure, like you have done what you proposed to do, but then during that time you morph already into a different person. Like you develop yourself, and then think, okay, what is really, or like what else is out there? What do I do next? What other nice challenges are out there.
Yeah, this is a good segue into what you do now with the MILRad chemistry.
Yes, exactly.
What a pioneers in this.
Right. And so, I was invited to give a talk at UH, and then I was told, okay, this is actually an interview, and I was totally excited. And then I heard then after a couple of months if I want to start here, and I of course did that. So it came to the right time, and I was so excited to come here because it was basically it's a new department, but it's also in Houston, which is a completely different area than Tennessee. But it was also that they offered me to be the director of the Center of Excellence in Polymer Chemistry. So it has a big name, but it's basically what it is that the Welch Foundation and UH they gave each other basically $4 million, so that there were $8 million in the pot. And then they said, okay, because polymers are so important in this area because of the oil and gas industry, we want to increase the number of graduates in this field because industry is asking for this, and not only engineers, polymer chemists. So, and basically I was hired with the job to build that center. So what does this mean? So this is basically saying you start hiring people, like you make searches, faculty searches, then you see that you can buy different instruments, that you build a service facility, which is still in the make. We still have to make that website, which I'm working on right now. But the mission is that you increase that you build a hub for polymer chemistry because it is so important for this area, but it is also important in general for our entire society.
Houston is a huge center for oil and gas, but also definitely polymer chemistry. I want to get into I want to get into that definitely. So you are your group is the pioneers for the MILRad, so metal insertion light-initiated radical polymerization. So if you can kind of explain what that means.
Okay. So I mean, like I said, I came with the idea, or like I came with a background in biomedical research. And so like again, it's interesting what happens when you come to a new place. So I started to talk to Professor Olaf Davulis, like he's here, and he is he's a very important figure in our department. And he's working on polyolefin, and our department is also kind of like interestingly structured because we have a lot of inorganic chemists, and we have natural product synthesis people, but it is not directed towards the medical school. So it is like it has a different outlook. And so when I started to talk to Olaf, I started to get interested in medical in metal organic chemistry. So and I never even thought about it doing this, or we never had a glove box in my lab. And then we started to read a lot of papers about how to combine basically the acrylates with olefins because they profit from each other. Like olefins profit from when there are polar groups incorporated, so like you can then blend. You can it has. You're
blending a non-polar monomer with a polar monomer, and that inherently makes a new structure which could be used for things. We're not really up to decide that, but
So but the challenge is how do you manage to bring these two different monomer worlds together? Because then you build this segmented structures from a polyolefin, a hydrophobic part, into, and then you have a segmented structure from an hydrophilic molecule. You have an amphiphil, and you can make this into a micelle, for example. You can make drug delivery with it when you want to, but it can also bridge different polymers, and then we are in the recycling business. So
just real quick about that. So in general, it's if you have in general, it's difficult to incorporate a polar monomer into a non-polar monomer, right? So typically,
Right.
like your
Yes.
catalyst will polymerize your non-polar monomer. It's
Mhm.
hard for the other monomer to incorporate in there. So you'll just end up
Yes.
getting this
Yes. Yeah. So
polyethylene, really, right?
yes. So and most of the time, what also can happen is that the acrylate, the polar monomer, poisons your catalyst, or the turnover number goes down, so the efficacy goes down. So you only create very crappy polymers. So it affects the ability of the metal organic catalyst to work.
Yeah.
So it's really a poison. So of course you can use acrylates or like polar monomers, which look more like an olefin. So like you mimic sort of, oh, it is an olefin, but here it is not an olefin. But our idea was, okay, we separate the world, like we let the olefin be polymerized by the insertion polymerization, so like it's supposed to be, and then we let the acrylate be polymerized by a radical mechanism. But how do you bring these two mechanisms together? And that is basically what we did for the last 5 years already.
Wow.
To build a process where you manage to have a polyolefin radical, and so you cleave the metal carbon bond, you create a radical on your polymer string, and then you can start a radical polymerization. So this is basically what it means. So like and this you do through light. So like I did a lot of light reactions in the past. So well, let's put it that way. At that time when I started here, um, there was a lot of interest in the polymer world after the controlled radical polymerizations were developed to initiate lots of radical polymerizations by light. So because you get a different level of control, like you can make patterns, or so like the light initiation was, it was very important. And so we thought, okay, how can we bring this in there? And we started really completely naively. And we had also a lot of luck that we started with the right catalyst, which we could make very easily in our lab. It was not very complicated to make a Burkhardt type
like catalyst.
Catalyst. And
yeah,
of course we have Professor Burkhardt part of our department, but it is but it was very exciting. So what I want to say is sometimes you just need to try also something completely what is not known to you. And it's still so much fun because I learned every day something completely new. It was not what I did before. And but it came only because I moved. I mean, when you read a paper, it does not have the same strength as if you would talk to a person. So therefore, you have to go to conferences or talk to a lot of people, because this is where the ideas come from. So it was not that I came here and said, okay, I want now to make a polymer of polyolefins and radicals. No, this is all very, very organic. It just grows on you. But then when you have a goal, then you have to be fast. Like you cannot wait for a long time. And I was really lucky that my one of my senior graduate students moved with me and became one very effective postdoc. And this was Dane Visa, and he's now a professor at Fisk University in Tennessee. He trained everybody. So, and this was very important, because when you start off, then you have all these new people, but of course they have to be effective, like they have to be trained properly, and this is very crucial that you get off in a good way. But this is
real quick, Professor Harth, can I ask you about what does the setup look like? What does the apparatus look like for doing these what you call it, like a die block copolymer, right? So how does it, what is it like if I'm just a new student that came in, like, hey, so how do I do this? Like, what is that?
Okay, so like you can do this in a flat, But
Mm.
yeah, you can do this in a flask. You can do this in a vial.
Mm.
So you start your polymerization. You can do this at room temperature. You can do this in a power reactor when you use ethylene. So you have to, because it's a gas, you have to work under pressure.
Yeah.
So at the beginning, we were, I did not know what a power reactor was, or like we were very cautious to work with pressure. We started actually with alpha olefin. This was the reason, because it's a liquid. So, and this was very familiar with us, and we did not have to buy a power reactor. So we started with one hexene, which is which is an alpha olefin. So you can distill this, you can flame dry it, you make your catalyst, you bring this together, and we polymerize it at room temperature. And of course, you can read then lots of literature in what solvent, and then you get your polyhexene. You get a polymer from this polyhexene.
And
so,
hexene is just, I mean, it's similar to people might be familiar with hexane, which is just a lighter fluid, really, just really. And hexene is just a double bond at the end. It's very very commercially available.
Also a waste product. So in industry, not many people know what to do with it. So it's now, when you read papers, there is a lot of move or like there's interest to develop catalysts to make use out of like one hexene, like alpha olefins in general. So what we realized is, with the typical metal organic catalysts developed for ethylene, they usually do not work that well with alpha olefin. But with hexenes, or like you have dodecene, which is a longer chain. But
probably can't bind to the catalyst. Is that probably why it just can't coordinate?
It gives you not as long polymers. Like they are like done at 30K or something, but you get not ultra high molecular weight polymeric materials. But it did not matter to us. It's actually easier for characterization. So like sometimes polyolefins you cannot characterize in size exclusion chromatography very easily. So I have to say, I think the advancement in science is also linked always to the analytics. So you have to have methods where you can analyze your material very confidently and can convince people that you have the material. So in the polyhexenes, they were very well soluble in THF. Like you can run them easily a GPC. You know exactly what you have.
Yep.
So and then to switch from a insertion pathway, which is guided by the.
So real quick, so in your flask, you'll have the solvent, so which is THF. You'll have probably a stir bar, and then you'll introduce
dichlomethane. It was dichlomethane.
DCM. Okay, that's your solvent. You'll introduce your alpha olefin. So in this case, we'll just say hexene, and then I assume the palladium, like a palladium catalyst, like the catalyst will actually facilitate the chemistry. So that's in there.
Yes.
You let it go for a while, I guess.
Yes,
is this I don't know, I'm actually unfamiliar how air sensitive the diamine catalysts are.
Yes. So the diamine catalysts are surprisingly stable, also as air. So, but we did everything in the glove bag. There are beautiful things out there. I mean, you can do things in the glove box, but you have maybe like 2 or 3, one glove box in the lab. I have one glove box, but these glove bags you can purchase, and you can blow them up in your hood.
Oh, okay.
And then you can float nitrogen to it, and then you can. I mean, it is good for catalysts, or like you can. Well, when your complex is not as sensitive, and we did everything in there. Of course, you have to flame dry your flask.
Yeah.
It has to be. Air is important. That there is no air. Like you have to freeze, pump. I mean, you have to make sure that you don't have oxygen or water in the system. This is the most important part. Yeah.
Yeah. So many, for those that are kind of unfamiliar with the chemistry, is that a lot of transition metals like palladium will bind. I assume it binds oxygen, and then it just kills your catalyst. Like you can't,
right?
And you're not able to break a palladium oxygen bond. Basically, it's super difficult.
Yes.
In general terms. So
exactly.
okay. so you polymerize the hexene, and then
Mhm.
how do you switch it then to
So,
do the
okay, so like here it's important that that you know about the chemistry of the, or like the mechanism of the specific catalyst you have. So the Burkhardt catalyst, what we did not know at that time. So when you add then an acrylate, you form a chelate. So like it is a very stable structure, and you cannot add another acrylate again. So it's not that basically you can just another polymerization of the acrylate start. So you can only cleave this chelate. This is kind of like a thermodynamic sink. So like it's kind of like you add the acrylate and then it's stuck there. But when you have ethylene or hexene present, then you can open this chelate again and it would start with hexene again. So the thing is, so like this is how actually the Burkhardt type catalyst became famous, because you can incorporate a higher amount of acrylates or polar monomers into these polymer chains, because they always they're always at the end of the branching. So you can then always bring open these chelates with an olefin, but not with another acrylate. So, and this is where our expertise came in. So we
So
then
real quick, just to kind of recap
yeah.
it too, the previous literature before you guys had come along, it was basically impossible to insert acrylate, right? Is that right? Or
it's still impossible.
still
So
impossible?
it's still impossible. So with the insertion mechanism, so you add basically your acrylate and then it forms this chelate. And then, so what are you doing then with this chelate? So what we did is when you shine light on it, the chelate, so like when we, I have to say this because we did not know first what is important. We made this block of polymer, but we did not realize what the mechanism was. All what we did is we added the monomer, then we were shining blue light on it, and then we realized that we had started a radical polymerization, and we polymerized acrylate. So, and we isolated this product.
So how did you? What was it? Was it an accident? You guys shine blue light on it? Or you guys just like
so
like?
What is this? Why did we have blue light in our? I think we had it for another experiment. In what did we did something else with blue light? I cannot recall, but
it was more or less like an accident. Like you were like, hey, let's just shine blue light
so
on
like
and see what happens.
It was more like, let's try this with the blue light, and we also made experiments with the palladium catalyst alone, so like that we knew it was reactive. So like you measure the absorbance, if it's even reactive, and we knew that it would do something. So the thing was, we had a polymer, but then how do you prove that you did not create an olefin and an acrylate separately, that you have not a mixture of two homopolymers? How do you prove that they are connected? So we knew that we had to first prove that we had a block copolymer, and we started a collaboration with Dow. So like Dow has a very nice facility in Freeport, and they have cryo NMR. Like we wanted to see basically that carbon, what connects basically the one carbon which comes in from the methyl acrylate and then polymerizes too. But then we realized we cannot find that carbon. We have to make a trick. So then we started to capture this radical, which is generated through the light, because so like there's also a lot of precedent in the literature. So when you actually shine light on a labile metal carbon bond, it creates a radical on the metal and a carbon on the and a radical on the polymer chain or the carbon. So in the literature, we found several examples that they could manage to cleave this metal carbon bond, but the radical ended up always at the wrong place. It was not on the polymer chain. So we had to prove that our radical is on the polyolefin chain, and therefore we integrated after we added our methyl acrylate. We added also a tempo molecule. This is a stable radical. So we captured it basically for analytical purposes. So, but I have to say that what we found out in our mechanistic investigations, which took us basically 2 years. So I went to a Gordon conference and presented my new paper, and I got completely like shredded, you know, because they had so many questions. And of course we had DOSY NMR, and I had already, you know, data from Dow, which proved very confidently that we had block copolymers. Have a segment of the olefin in the radical, but they said, okay, how on earth are you doing this? I mean, this makes no sense, and it's like, you know, you should create other radicals here, and are you sure, and whatever. So, and all these questions, they were so important because they're structured basically how we planned our mechanistic study. Because you can always say, okay, we do a mechanistic study, but where do you start? So, and we realized we have to investigate very much in detail what is happening with that chelate. You know, like we isolated the chelate, then we found out, you know, from the complex itself with the polymer attached, and then we found out we cannot cleave it with the light alone. That it has to be the ancillary ligand present, and that was magic. So when you start with a Brucher type catalyst, you have always an ancillary ligand. This is a acetonitrile, one equivalent.
Okay, yep.
When you do not have that, it's not going to work. It's like a stone. The chelate is like totally stable. However, when you have, you know, I had another student, like Zhusheng was this, Zhusheng Liu, who just graduated this year. He made a distorted palladium catalyst. So when it's sterically demanding, and when the chelate, of course, the chelate can be 6-membered, 5-membered, 4-membered, and it goes through, you know, different. So it's an equilibrium, and it finds this equilibrium. Sometimes the equilibrium is in the 4 and 5-membered ring state. Then you don't ancillary ligand, but it's always better to have it. So it helps to open the chelate, and then it is easy to cleave the metal carbon bond. You can chop it then with the light. And this we realized basically after we were doing our mechanistic study. And then we also found why other people failed, or like when that what was wrong in their mechanism. So it had been tried before many times by two research groups, but they could not place the radical at the polyolefin, or the radical polymerization was too fast. You know, there are many different factors. So, but yeah, I can say that this was, or like when we started this, it was very interesting for us to learn about how the Brucher catalyst actually reacts, and that it was the ideal catalyst for us to start that project. You know, like otherwise it would have not have worked when we would have not had the properties of that specific catalyst.
Now, do you foresee, like, what are some of the applications of these like diblock copolymers? Like what is special about? Well, first of all, it's unprecedented that you can do this in one pot, right? So like you build out your hexene polymer, then you introduce a new radical mechanism. Now you're able to introduce acrylate. So that was already unprecedented, right? Like no one had done that before, right? Okay.
Yes.
So that's already unprecedented in the literature. What are some of the applications of this new polymer, basically, I guess?
Yes. So like what we want to try to do is like bring in as many different types of, or like combine. So there's an entire area of like what is called functionalized, or like functionalized polyolefins, polyolefins. So when you have different functions. So it was also very limited what monomer families you can combine with polyolefins. So like there were only a limited amount of acrylates in general. So what we could show is, first of all, the polyolefin insertion polymerization was living. So this is kind of important. So you can you have also, they can be semi-crystalline. So you can have all kinds of polyolefins. Also we broaden it to polyethylene. So and it's also not, you can make short polyolefins and long polyolefins. And then with the free radical polymerization, we showed that we can polymerize, like the acrylates and methyl methacrylate. Where we were limited to were the amides and the styrene. So, you want to basically combine your polyolefin with the broadest scope of other monomer families to give a certain application. So what you could do then is you can self-assemble these polyolefins. You can make nanostructures from these, and you can bring these nanostructures into commodity plastic. So there is a theory out there that when you increase the heterogeneity, when you make your commodity plastic not as even, or when you blend it with other things together, but the blend has to be in a way that the familiar part sticks out. So you can think about bringing a micelle of polymers into a polymer blend, and then you can change the entire properties of the plastic. So you don't have to develop another plastic anymore. Plastics are wonderful materials because they can do a broad range of different properties. But maybe you think about, okay, I don't develop a new catalyst. I just bring in an additive, and you do not need a whole lot of these hetero structures. You bring this in and have then a toughening or a weakening, or like make it just create different types of properties. Then, of course, you can think about how can you use the more sturdy structure, or like the more sturdy properties of polyethylene in terms of, and combine this with groups which you can integrate with the polar monomers. So like this is our very weird sentence. But for example, for energy applications, when you want to build a new dielectric material, so here we go now into the area of energy harvesting, energy storage, energy conversion. So since so we want now to replace the fossil fuels, and we want to create more better batteries. Like we want to use, or like generate more energy out of in an electrical way. But then we need better batteries, or other batteries where we don't use so much metal. So but when I'm not basically a battery expert, but there are many different aspects of how you can work on a battery to make it more effective. And one issue is that you can work on a better membrane, or a better dielectric exchange. And then you have to transport charges. So you can now think of how can we get a more sturdy material, with the better, higher TG, what does not break down as easily as an acrylate maybe, or like another material. How can we make materials where they are sturdy, which a polyolefin definitely is, but on the other hand, how can we integrate polar groups or charge groups into the olefin in very segmented regions that we do not affect the self-assembly of that material? So, or for recycling, you take just your polar group, whatever this is, and mix it together with a polyolefin. So this you can use for recycling. So I believe that you can use it for many different applications where we don't even know what what we can use it for, because nobody had done this molecule before. You know, and
Right.
this is what we do right now. We just explore what we can do with it.
Yeah. So what's kind of the state of the research right now? Like, where are the shortcomings and like where is the future directions? Because I think you mentioned it's limited to butyl acrylate or methyl acrylate. I'm sorry, as the polar monomer. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so like we are now in the basically third generation of this MILRad, what we call it.
Mhm.
So after that, we made what we call MILRad functionalization. So we used that experience, what we had with the radical capturing with the tempo molecules. We used that to start a controlled radical polymerization. So you can functionalize these tempo molecules with controlled radical polymerization starters, initiators, and then we could, you know, do ATRP, we could do RAF, we could do NMP, and then we could, you know, like then we had a living polyethylene and also a living acrylate block. So and then we could polymerize styrene, we could polymerize methyl methacrylate, polyacrylamide, and also we could create multi-blocks. You know, like you can then, you know, you can make ABA. These are very interesting structures. So, and the last project we had, or like, it is not MILRad related, but it came out of MILRad. So we realized also when we work with radicals, this is tricky. You know, like you have to work with light, you have to have radicals, and now we have a process what we call PACE, and this was developed by one of my graduate students. This was developed by Jen Dow, and what she basically learned, or like during her time in my lab, so she realized that when you have a chelate, you know, when you have a Broca type chelate, but when it's an active ester, that you can place on a polyolefin one active ester group. I mean, it's always at the end of the branches, but it is one specific one. But you have it as a head group. You know, you don't post functionalize it. You have it as a head group. So what she did with this is, so you start to polymerize with a modified diamine Broca type catalyst, which carries this chelate, but it turns into an active ester. You can take then this active ester and then exchange for all sorts of things. You know, like you can exchange it for an initiator for ring opening polymerization. So you don't have to do MILRad anymore.
Yeah.
So this is now a very interesting method for us, because you can with a semi-telic helix, you know, you can then attach it to different things. So we now go more into the direction of making different architectures and use that chemistry to explore this chemistry in different ways. What we also work on is like replacing the palladium catalyst with a nickel catalyst.
Yeah.
So, you know, and this is, of course, a totally different ballgame. What I did not realize is when you change the metal, you change the entire everything. You have to start from scratch again. So this is because when we talk to industry, they liked our approach in chemistry, but they did not like the palladium very much, although you don't need much of that polymer, I have to say. It's still very good. But
yeah, I just want to real quick just about that, because
yes.
One of the things I was going to ask about is to kind of be cynical here is that, well, you're using palladium, right? And so it's like the obvious thing is to say is, well, palladium, for those who don't know, palladium is a very expensive transition metal, especially like if you really were to bring this to industry scale, palladium is not a very efficient way to do this at all. So yeah, I was just going to ask about, like, have you looked at different transition metals? Because nickel is much more, I assume it's much cheaper. I actually don't know the price difference. Much cheaper. And it's also much more earth abundant, I think. So it would be much more feasible to do it with nickel instead of palladium.
Yes. And this was, I mean, we knew this from very early on, and we were always asked, like, why don't you, switch to nickel? Of course, yes, right. But you have to have first a suitable complex available. And yeah, so I think we got it now. We have now a process which is working, and but it took us again like two years or nearly 3 years. We started this yeah, almost 3 years ago, and yeah, 2.5 years ago. And so like we have now some success, and yeah, we just want to develop this further, that we can basically show that MILRad is possible, or that you can make block polymers as good as you can do with the palladium catalyst. You can do this also with the nickel catalyst.
Yeah.
So this would be really nice, And but I have to say that the graduate students I have, like these are the ultimate drivers, because they become real experts. And then I would have not had the people I had, nothing would be there. So I really have to thank a lot of my I mean, all of this is basically built on these on the students who make it, or like get very passionate about it and think deeply about it.
Yeah.
Or like, what do we really need? And yeah, so like I've been fortunate that I could work with people who really think deeply. I mean, you have students who are weaker and stronger, but when you have two people, or like two people who just can shape a lab, or like can teach other people as well, or like talk interestingly about their research, and are excited about it, and of course, yeah, this is really important, that they get inspired, that they think further. This is the key. I mean,
yeah, just a general comment about like the graduate life in general. Like, I mean, yeah, we're just some kids just doing. I mean, a lot of this groundbreaking stuff that is going on in academia is just done by some kids. Like, we're just some kids that are just in the lab doing stuff that we really like, and that's
so
where a lot of this stuff is happening.
Exactly, and like usually it comes to when they're discussing amongst themselves, when they read something. I mean, me as a professor, I can give a direction, or I can encourage, and I read also something. But it is usually when they think about what, or like, I can emphasize where the problem is, and then they think about it. But it is I mean, it's fascinating to me how these students also change during the time. They are at the beginning a little bit insecure, and they have to find their project, and it's then suddenly it takes shape, because they get passionate about one specific thing, and then they dig into it. And this is fascinating to see. And when they are really, after 4 years, then you feel they are done. I mean, I cannot do anything for them anymore. They've experienced everything. They know how to write a paper. They know how to do the research, and then they are really done, right?
Yeah.
And I have to say that the field, the polymer field, you can do so much with this. They work in different sectors, like in as a patent attorney, in industry, in college, in consulting. I mean, you can do so much with this, but it is very applied, because polymers are everywhere. I mean, really, seriously. And
just as we like wrap up here, the one downfall I'd say is, especially like in high school chemistry, even like undergrad, I mean, how little we talk about polymers in general chemistry. I think there needs to be more of it, I think. I mean, I don't really have an answer for that, but how much polymers are in our day-to-day lives, and we don't really talk about it in early on in people's education, I think is honestly kind of a crime. So I don't know if you like want to speak to that a little bit, because you are so involved in the polymer chemistry.
Yes, like as an undergraduate, I mean, all what you want to go through is your organic chemistry class, but at the moment, actually, the ACS requires that in undergraduate research, there has to be taught some polymer chemistry. How it looks like is like that there is 1 or 2 classes at the end of the organic chemistry section where they talk about polymers. So
Yeah.
I can really say that some organic chemists don't think actually that polymer chemistry is engineering. It is not. And it is an absolute fascinating field, and it is too important to be not taught at the undergraduate level. And I have to say that in general, we are suffering right now that we do not have enough graduate students in chemistry, because this entire field is, well, specifically also in polymer chemistry, because it's not advertised in a way that it's attractive for this generation of people, because polymers are plastics, and these are kind of like badly labeled. But I mean, it's not the fault of the plastic that it's cheap and so successful. It has like replaced many traditional materials, and it's cheaper. And we just have to wisely produce good materials out of these polymers, you know, and then what we do with plastic bags and plastic bottles, this we can really think about a little bit further, that we make the consumables out of other materials, which are maybe not as environmentally demanding.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, and to any student that like feels like chemistry is not their thing, like, well, like, don't get bogged down on the organic, hard organic stuff. Like, go reach out, go reach out to a polymer chemist. Go reach out to, because there's so much. Chemistry is very broad, and you know, if you're not successful in your gen chem, or you're not successful in
doesn't mean anything.
in your organic, and you can definitely test this, like wanting to go to med school and just transitioning to chemistry, like there is opportunity for chemistry, I think, for everyone.
Yes. So because why I stayed in chemistry is because it is some things don't need a 10-step synthesis, you know, like you can make lots of materials with like one reaction, and you have something which you can use. So it's like it has a materials application, you know, and this fascinated me. And this is something what is not taught a lot in undergraduate, and this is kind of an area which is completely underdeveloped, you know, in my opinion.
Yeah, so hopefully in the years to come, we can definitely start to change that perception. But Professor Harth, I want to thank you so much for your time. I greatly appreciate you.
It was fun to talk to you.
Yeah, and hopefully next couple of years we'll have you back on, and we'll see if these results, you know, start to come in and change. So thank you again to all the listeners out there, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Okay.